Hello everyone, a very warm welcome to all of you and thank you for joining our webinar on the ABSA case study, Data Virtualization, the Game Changer. My name is Tulika and I will be your host for this session. Many organizations are embarking on strategically important journeys to embrace data and analytics. The goal can be to improve internal efficiencies, improve the customer experience, drive new business models and revenue streams, or provide better services. However, getting the right data at the right time is a huge challenge, and traditional technologies and data architectures are simply not up to this task. In today's webinar, we will explore the ways data virtualization is changing the game and accelerating ABSA's data-driven objectives. We will be covering ABSA's data strategy and looking at how data virtualization and a partnership with Denodo has enabled them to transform their organization to become a data-driven enterprise. I would now like to welcome our speakers for this session. We have with us today Heinrich Momberg, VP of Data Engineering at ABSA Group, a South African bank. Heinrich leads a team of data engineers at ABSA. He has more than 20 years of experience in the industry and has worked as a software developer, solutions architect, and data engineer. He is currently responsible for the big data, analytics, and the virtualization platforms and the build-out of the data strategy at ABSA. I would also like to welcome our moderator for this session, Kevin McKerr, sales leader at BITanium Consulting. Kevin is responsible for all revenue-generating activities at BITanium and leads the team that works closely with clients to identify opportunities for improvement. Working with clients and helping solve their problems provides Kevin with deep insight into the challenges across industries and data environments. Kevin has over 20 years' experience in the information technology industry, accumulating knowledge in data and analytics, information and cybersecurity, service management, and mobile technologies. Just a couple of things before we get started. Remember, the webinar is being recorded and it will be available on demand after this live session. During the presentation, you will be in listen-only mode, but I encourage you to submit questions using the question box below the screen anytime during the webinar, and we will get back to you with answers personally after the webinar session. We also have some relevant resources that you may find in the Attachments tab below the presentation window. This webinar includes a whiteboard session during which I do recommend going into full screen mode for better viewing. We are pleased to offer this webinar to you, and on that note, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Kevin. Thank you very much. Kevin?
How do we deliver the agility, flexibility, and availability required from enterprise data today while dealing with complex legacy data environments? Hello and welcome to our interactive whiteboard session exploring how Denodo Data Virtualization is answering this burning question. Joining me today is Heinrich Momberg, VP of Data Engineering at ABSA, one of Africa's largest and most respected banks, and myself, Kevin McKerr from BITanium Consulting, as we explore the ways ABSA is achieving that agility, flexibility, availability in their data environment. Hein, welcome, and thank you for sharing your experience with us today. Perhaps you could kick things off and let us know a little bit about ABSA.
Thanks for the introduction, Kevin. ABSA Group is a South African-based financial services group. We are one of the 4 largest banks in South Africa and have a presence in 11 countries in the African continent. We offer personal and business banking, credit service, corporate and investment banking, wealth and investment management across the continent. Kevin, do you maybe want to tell us a bit more about BITanium before we get going?
Thanks, Hein. Our mission at BITanium Consulting is to unlock the value of data for our clients across banking, insurance, healthcare, FMCG, mining, retail, and all other businesses that are looking to use data to improve their business. It's not only about building, running, and supporting modern data environments. It's about solving the problems of the constantly evolving data landscape. With that said, Hein, we'll hand back over to you to let us know how ABSA started your data virtualization journey.
Thanks, Kevin. For today, I'll be using interactive whiteboarding for the presentation. I'm going to start off by explaining why we chose to adopt a virtualization platform like Denodo and the actual use case behind it. To save a bit of time, I've just prepared a bit of templated drawings, otherwise we have to draw all of it. So I'm just going to reuse some of this. First, a bit of history to set the scene. Building a traditional enterprise data warehouse is something that almost every large enterprise embarks on. Those who've tried this will know that it's not a trivial ask, especially in a large organization with such a complex business model and vast data integration landscape like a bank. We're one of those organizations that actually tried this, and not once. We've done this more than one time. Our first attempt at an enterprise data warehouse was started about 20 years ago. Since then, we've undergone various organizational changes, including a major acquisition by a bank in the UK. Under this acquisition, our original warehouse was deemed outdated and not fit for purpose, and a new enterprise warehouse design was built and started in 2009, with the intention to obviously decommission the old legacy warehouse. This has proven to be very difficult and was never fully achieved. To further complicate things, the holding company in the UK has sold us in 2016, and we decided to separate, which really complicated our data architecture. The short of it, just to give you a bit of an idea what it looks like, today we are basically sitting with two warehouses. And just to set the scene, it's basically an environment by which we've got lots of source data being integrated into either the old or the new warehouse. And then on the consuming side, obviously the complexity whereby some of our consumers have started moving over to the new enterprise data warehouse. Some are still getting the data from the old. So we're sitting with a massive complex integration landscape and duplication of data. In recent years, we've revisited this landscape, and we took a strategic decision in 2018 to start modernizing this ecosystem, to start transforming us into a more data-driven digital organization. Since then, we've started to introduce new data platforms, which handles data at scale much better and also gives us a bit more flexibility and agility. What it really means, we've started embracing a big data strategy and deploying scalable platforms that support things like parallel processing and parallel storage capabilities. And basically adopting a concept with a data lake and real-time streaming. So what we've started introducing in the environment is a data lake that lives next to our old warehouse components, with the intention that we migrate from these environments over into the data lake. It also implies that all of the source data that we traditionally ingested into our warehouse environments needs to be rerouted into our data lake environment. Just going to indicate the flows, give you an idea that we need to look at repointing all of those flows to start pushing data into the data lake. This is actually the easy part, as it doesn't have too much impact on the organization. They're still getting their data from the legacy warehouses. We can build out the data lake in parallel. Obviously comes with its own complexity. The challenging part is really on the consumption side. While we do all of this, business must continue. So the only way for us to really look at deploying this strategy is to look at a way of how we can abstract the business from the chains, basically by looking at slotting in a abstraction layer between our current warehouse environments and where they get the data from, while we build out the strategic platform. This is probably one of the biggest challenges for us to ensure that this stays as seamless as possible. It is a very complex environment, so we need to look at what's the best strategy to achieve this. For this reason, we've started looking at things like virtualization platforms. And to give you an idea how we're approaching this, we've adopted something like the Nodo in ABSA, which gives us this ability to actually do this very seamlessly behind the scenes. What this basically means is that instead of consumers getting their data directly from one of our legacy warehouse environments, the first thing we start doing is abstracting them by giving them some virtual views to which they will connect to on a platform like the Nodo to consume their data. Behind the scenes, we then obviously plumb this into our legacy warehouse environments to make sure the connectivity and the source data is still available. During this journey, this allows us not only to migrate the data and the flows from our warehouse environments into the data lake, but also starting to reconstruct some of the base data sources from which this data is being sourced from to obtain this from the data lake. So it basically looks like something like this, where we start exposing some of our data lake data on the Nodo. And then as we mature things, instead of sourcing it from our warehouses, serving it directly out of the Nodo from our abstracted views, allowing us over time then to decouple the consumers from the old warehouses and rerouting the data and stripping it down. So this strategy allows us to abstract them without too much impact, get them to start sourcing the data from the data lake, still get what they used to get into the use cases and MI and BI environments, allowing us then to ultimately shut down and decommission these very costly and legacy technology stacks. Okay, so that's the first use case we've looked at, where we started introducing the Nodo. So in summary, it really helps us to abstract away from a legacy world. It helps us to become more flexible and agile. Also helps us to decommission a very costly data integration and proprietary warehouse environment.
Thanks, Hein. Okay, so that was a good starting point. And if you had to kind of just take a high-level estimate, how much kind of time do you reckon that having that virtual layer has saved you? I mean, what was the accelerator kind of factor? Denodo often talks about 10x, which is the 10 times quicker to do integrations, etc., through the virtual layer. What was your experience in terms of doing this migration? If you had to just put a high-level estimate on it.
Well, Kevin, I'm definitely going to say we're up there in the 10x. If you think about having to rebuild all of the legacy ETL pipelines that was not only feeding the warehouses, but also consuming the data from these warehouses, instead of just exposing almost a like for like what business used to get, and almost deferring the problem so they can look and replumbing their data into the data lake later, I definitely think we are up there 10 times quicker than what it would have taken us. To give you an idea, this was scoped out as a 5-year program, and we've been on this journey for the last 2 years, and we should be able to wrap it up end of this year.
Okay, brilliant, brilliant, well done. Okay, thank you. What's next?
Well, obviously the first step for us was to focus on our legacy warehouse decommissioning, as I've just shown. But after we've landed the Nodo in the environment and started working with our business consumers, we've really started realizing that there's more to the Nodo than just abstracting away from data sources. One of the biggest challenges that we still faced in the organization, regardless of abstraction or legacy warehouse decommissioning, was the fact that we still need to integrate a lot of data. Not all of the data that we currently are making available have been ingested into the data lake. To give you an idea, we've routed some of the warehouse data into the data lake. We've started ingesting more source data in there, but there's still use cases, either new use cases or existing ones, that traditionally used to do their own integration. And for that, they had to build pipelines into various other sources systems. Although our strategy is trying to get a central data lake for sourcing of all our enterprise assets, the use cases still exist that there might be additional data that needs to be correlated with our enterprise assets. And for that, it's very hard environment for consumers from an integration or finding that source data. So we started playing with the Nodo as more than just abstraction. And we started looking at a model by which we allow, again, using someone like the Nodo or something like the Nodo as a virtualization layer, not just to expose and allow them to source data from the data lake only. And we started sort of opening the door where teams, especially in non-production environments, start exposing views to other source systems that doesn't sit on the data lake, which allows not only for flexibility and agility, especially where data consumers doesn't quite know what data they need, allows them to really shape their use case, do quick data integration without having to go through all the data integration pain. So I think in this case, we started realizing the Nodo can really help us on this journey to become transformative and agile. And this is really paying off at the moment.
Right. So one of the other things it does as well, Hein, is that typically those direct integrations between consumer and source that doesn't live inside of the database, often that's ungoverned. And by enabling them to access that through the Denodo layer, it almost kind of brings those use cases and those sources into the kind of governance fold that says, hey, we know who's accessing and how they're accessing it in the appropriate manner.
Spot on. I think one of the key features we've really starting to enjoy from Denodo is things like the catalog. To your point, previously we didn't have insight of those point-to-point type of flows to the source systems, where this now all gets cataloged for us in Denodo. Okay, thus far we've looked at using Denodo for abstracting us from our warehouses, and also starting giving consumers the opportunity to connect to a single source where we can integrate across multiple platforms and data sources. Still, we felt we haven't really utilized Denodo to its full potential. So we started looking at a world by which we want to start integrating data and start applying logic to our data while we transform and integrate it. And we found a really good use case at ABSA, where we're running a traditional trade store. I'm just going to pause there for a second and give you a bit of background. We're running an end-of-day trade store in our investment banking section, by which we are collecting data from various trading platforms. And this was a custom in-house built monolithic application which sources all this data from the sources and then do conformance and integration, all in a custom written way. Data is then exposed to consumers through a REST API. This is really hard to maintain and really not a scalable solution, but it's got some immense complexity in the integration and conformance of the data to a common taxonomy and also a common schema. We've started unpacking this monolithic beast into some pieces and realized there's a really great use case for something like a virtualization platform here to help us to decompose all of this logic of conformance and integration into real logical pieces. What I'm going to do as well is just overlay this with Denodo and show how we're approaching this at the moment. First thing we've started doing is, as shown earlier, one of our key strategies in the bank is to adopt a data lake strategy. As shown in the previous use cases, we are routing some of the source data into our data lake, but it really comes in a non-conform type of native format without implying any conformance or standardization on the data. And for that reason, we still had to, so acquisition of data was not a problem. Getting that available in Denodo and then exposing this for access to consumers, that was sort of the easy part. The challenging part was where we needed to start looking at applying those taxonomies. And this is really the first use case where I think we started utilizing Denodo for its potential, where we start looking at not only sourcing data and exposing data, but also implementing a level of integration where we start transforming and creating some business semantics on top of the source data as it comes. So the flow will typically be something like this, where we see our data lake as the official source for the data, and then that level of taxonomy and enrichment of the data and transformation into a semantic and a consumption layer. This is really where I think we start utilizing Denodo to the extent of giving us the ability, without having to build massive complex ETL processes, rather do this in a logical fashion with layering some of our views, where we could, for instance, enrich the data with common reference data, or transform this into a consumable like-for-like format that our consumers were used to getting from a REST API. So basically what will happen as we do this integration through Denodo, the ultimate end result from a consumption point of view, we are able to create exactly what they currently get from the REST APIs, which allows us again to then shut down things like a traditional trade store and let our consumers take it from from a platform like the Nodo.
So, Hein, I'm just thinking out loud here, but the cost saving of retiring that platform must be significant.
It is, and funny enough, not only on the technology piece, Kevin, like I mentioned, this is really hard to maintain. So if you look at the amount of time and effort that goes into supporting a platform like this, and as I mentioned, to make a change to that system, we've got zero agility and flexibility in that system. There's normally massive impact, the amount of testing that needs to happen if we make a small change, and the impact on all of those consumers, if you've got multiple consumers reading this. The technical footprint in this case is really the small one, the impact on the organization and the importance of this is I think way more significant than a technical cost.
Right, and can Denodo express data through an API?
It does. We've started utilizing the web services that gets exposed from the consumption layer. In some cases, some of our consumers started adopting the data lake more than just the virtualization platform. So in most cases, we are trying to expose the data through REST-based services on the Nodo. But we've also started doing is a really interesting strategy of running a scheduled process daily against the Nodo where all our integration and conformance logic says, and then do a write back of the output into a dupe, so almost like a materialized view where consumers can then go and utilize this data directly from the data lake. And in some cases, build further API layers on top of this, depending on the integration requirements. So you can see how flexible this really allows us to be. The key piece is this is now maintainable. The maintenance is much simpler now, and the cost for us to run this is much better.
Yeah, superb. So that certainly speaks to our flexible, available kind of mindset that we're looking for.
Okay.
Okay, well done. So that was our trade store use case. Anything further to add here before we move on, Hein?
No, I don't think so,
Okay.
Kevin.
Okay, good stuff. Well done. So what's next?
Okay. The next use case we started looking at is, as shown in our previous use cases, one of the key objectives at ABSA is to modernize our data infrastructure and architecture. And for that reason, we started adopting a data lake approach. One of the key things that we've realized after moving off our legacy data warehouses or traditional relational database management systems is that the data lake that we're building on Hadoop is not really the silver bullet, and we still have a need for integrating data and creating relational type of structures. To some extent, Hive on Hadoop provides us that capability. But one of the key things we've picked up in the organization, and there was a bit of resistance, is where traditional developers with SQL type skills are now required to become Hadoop proficient and having to upskill on things like Spark, which is quite a steep jump in a skill set. So what we've realized is that what teams do is where we encourage them to come and build on Hadoop and drive principles like bring your code to the data where it sits in the data lake. Teams tend to stay in their comfort zones on relational database management systems. So what they will do as we source data into the data lake, they will source all of that data out of the data lake in a traditional relational database management system, again, like a proprietary SQL database, and then on top of that, build their MI. One of the use cases we are currently piloting within the bank is to demonstrate to teams how easy it is to do this on something like a virtualization platform. How this will basically work is instead of constructing or taking all of the data out of our data lake for use downstream, we start exposing the data lake views in the Nodo, and then we're getting teams to build their own data models And instead of constructing it in a relational database system, showing them how simple this is to actually create that exact same data model um, in the Denodo environment. The key thing that's the benefit for that is that we physically don't move the data like we used to do, take the data out of the data lake, persist it again in something like SQL. In this case, teams are realizing the exact same data model on Denodo, doing all the integration and transformation that is required to surface the business requirement, plugging their BI and MI tools directly into Denodo, allowing us to get off these expensive RDBMS systems. But then also the big advantage here is there's no physical move of data. All the queries are delegated down to the underlying storage of the data. So we sort of overcome both the challenges of stop moving the data around and the key skill set challenge. We're finding non-technical people find it really easy to construct and create these objects on the node, or typically how they used to do it on a relational database system like views and tables. Okay.
Right, and you've just touched on two kind of key benefits. One is the creation of this common SQL engine, which allows your teams not have to upskill on all the new technologies that are coming into the bank. We're finding over and over that that is a major benefit to banks and others. And the other is to just contain this continual kind of replication and of additional data marts over and over. What about security? How do you handle that in this model?
We are fully integrated, obviously managed secure network on which we integrate all of our platforms, including things like the data lake as well as the Denodo. So everything is driven from a central identity access management point of view. If you get granted access on the data lake, it all propagates through a tool like the Denodo as well, driving things with security groups on Active Directory. So we manage everything centrally, and it seamlessly integrates across the estate.
So you give the team the platform to build their model, spin up their virtual data environment, data mart, and away they go. And everything that goes through Denodo and the virtualization layer then is governed according to the bank's policy.
Correct.
Right. Okay. And in terms of velocity, we talk about, hey, how quickly can we provide these data environments to the business units, etc. How much quicker is it to spin up a virtual data mart to an existing, like a traditional mart where it would have to be physical?
Given the short answer there is that we are obviously embracing a lot virtual world. We are moving into a world by which we are trying to get our physical footprint in our data center shut down. Traditionally, to give you an idea, to obtain a relational database management system, you had to go and procure hardware, had to go and do a proper installation together with our infrastructure teams. It could have taken months for us to get an environment. And that's just to setting up the infrastructure. If you think about how long it takes to build a data model and all the incoming and outgoing ETL, or the ETL between the layers in your data model, I think this is one of the key reasons why we started moving away from this legacy approach. Where we are today, everything is provisioned on virtual servers, a cloud type of on-premise cloud fashion. For us to spin up a new Denodo environment, whether it be a test or production environment, is really quick. And I think the real benefit is not only what we're getting out of virtualization, but also what we are getting out of how easy it is to construct these logical concepts on the Denodo. And there's no physical ETL that moves data anymore. So all in all, time to market, I would say we've really come down from months into weeks.
Right. Okay, good. That's very powerful. Thanks, Hein. Anything else to add?
No, I guess that's it.
Okay, thank you. So what's next?
Okay. I think what you can see from the previous use cases, we've taken a very conservative introduction into data virtualization. It's something that's totally new to us. We come from a legacy physical warehouse implementation world. I think the more and more we utilize things like virtualization, we really start realizing the capabilities. One of the key strategies for us at ABSA is also to start looking at our journey into the cloud. There's a massive drive for us to really bring down our physical footprint and our data center size. So what we will be looking at next for ABSA is how do we migrate into a cloud provider, and then again trying to minimize that impact to our business. So I think we've realized that a tool like Denodo or a platform like Denodo is really giving us some great abstraction capabilities, not only from a on-premise point of view, but also to make us sort of cloud agnostic and where we run. We're very excited about the Denodo 8, which we've recently upgraded, and all the features that comes with it, and the way it can be deployed from a global point of view, and not really care about which cloud or where our data is positioned. So I think that's one of the key things that we are looking at next, is Denodo and cloud.
Thanks, Hein. And then also just delivering on the mandate from the bank to provide data in an agile, flexible, kind of available sort of way. It's almost like once that Denodo virtualization layer is in place, it's like the data factory is open for business. And I know that there's kind of a queue outside the data engineering door for different business units that are looking to access data in the way that they need it. So I know that over the next kind of coming months, we're going to be very busy fulfilling all of these different use cases through the virtualization layer.
Well, spot on. I think as we've indicated in those use cases, how we've starting to adopt virtualization and something like the Denodo more aggressively. This is a whole paradigm shift for us, where we used to do things centrally with data engineering, and it used to become the bottleneck. This allows us now to really start creating this fabric where teams can come and build themselves, and we're rolling it out. This will definitely be part of the next steps for us to roll this to the organization. The only part we'll look at from a central team is to make it easier to get access to the data. From that point onwards, it becomes a self-service, do-it-yourself game. This is a complete game changer for us.
Right, thanks, Hein. And then just to kind of wrap up, maybe just a comment on the ABSA, Denodo, and BITanium Consulting partnership, and that's relevant because it's the team that's dynamic that also contributes to the success. So maybe just a word from you on that.
I think this is a win-win situation. To give you a practical example, we've recently upgraded our Denodo environment, and it was super successful, where we really get good support locally from BITanium from a SME point of view, and then obviously Denodo support. So for us to run and manage this platform is really just simple if we do it in a partnership like this, and I think it's really working well.
Thank you, Hein. So just a quick summary. We started off with an application migration, and then we shifted over to almost kind of like a reducing of dependency on a legacy system, which was your trade system. We also touched on combining multiple data sources and abstracting that so that the consumer can get easy, agile access to all of those various sources. We spun up virtual data marts, provided single view of across, and then also, the future is talking about cloud migration and a kind of data factory type environment where we can really kind of welcome business in and say, hey, whatever you need, we've got it. So we've certainly had a positive experience. I know you and I have been working on this probably for the last 18 months or so together, but in the bigger picture, that's not a long period of time to be able to have achieved what we've achieved in that period. So maybe just a final kind of word on virtualization and recommendation to the audience, for those who are out there that maybe haven't invested in virtualization just yet.
Oh, definitely. I think virtualization is really setting us up for the future. If you look at how we're trying to keep a hybrid legacy world together with an on-prem cloud world together, I think it's impossible to try and do this without a strategy like virtualization. And it's key to start looking at some of your leading visualization platforms for like the Nodo. For something like this, to attempt this in any other way, I think will take um, a very long time, if not twice as long. So I don't really think virtualization should be part of every key large organization's strategy. The power you get out of it from, I think some of the key things you've mentioned, agility, flexibility, especially those two, I think that's key for any large organization, that you do have that agility and flexibility and time to market. You can't go through these legacy old monolithic builds of months or years anymore. Things need to happen in weeks or days. And I really think that's what virtualization gives you. So definitely recommend that everyone looks at it.
Okay, super. Thank you, Hein. So a big thank you for sharing your experience with us, Hein, and look forward to more partnership going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin and Hein, for that insightful session. I'm sure our audience have enjoyed it as much as I. Unfortunately, we are now out of time. Thank you for submitting your questions. As a reminder, if you have any questions, please submit these online in the question panel below the screen, and we'll make sure to personally respond back with an answer. Before we disconnect, I'd like to remind you on a couple of things. The webinar has been recorded and it will be available on demand after this live session. You may also find some relevant resources in the attachments tab on your screen. If you're interested in trying out the Denodo platform for yourself, we do have free trials available in the cloud on AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud, and you may find the link to those in the attachments tab as well. Thank you very much for your participation, and we hope you enjoyed the webinar. Have a wonderful day.